Order, please. Order. The daily routine, presenting and reading petitions, presenting reports of committees, tabling reports, regulations, and other papers, statements by ministers, government notices of motion. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Minister of Health and Wellness, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas high blood pressure is a common chronic condition that affects nearly 30% of Nova Scotia adults, and the figure grows to 70% in people with diabetes. And whereas blood pressure is often called the silent killer because of its lack of symptoms, the only way to know if you have high blood pressure is to have it checked by a healthcare professional. And whereas the My Blood Pressure initiative encourages all Nova Scotians to have their blood pressure checked whenever they can and to track their numbers on a convenient wallet-sized card, therefore be it resolved that members of this House of Assembly commend the staff of the Nova Scotia Renal Program, Diabetes Care Program of Nova Scotia, and Cardiovascular Health Nova Scotia for leading this program and for encouraging all Nova Scotians to check it. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Excuse me. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 92 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Consumer Protection Act.
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 92 of the Revised Statute 1989, the Consumer Protection Act.
Bill number 114, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 92 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Consumer Protection Act.
Order the bill be read a second time on a future day. Notices of motion. The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on June 24, 2011, Clare hosted the 6th annual Relay for Life fundraiser for the Canadian Cancer Society. And whereas 15 teams with 149 participants, including 86 cancer survivors, took part in this year's event. And whereas through the hard work of the many participants, this year's event raised $45,016 for the Canadian Cancer Society and cancer research. Therefore, be resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate the many volunteers and participants that make Clare Relay for Life a success and thank them for their dedication and commitment to the Canadian Cancer Society. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on July 12, 2011, Bedford sailor Will Appold skippered his yacht Valkyrie to victory in the top class of the Marblehead to Halifax Ocean Race. And whereas Appold completed the race in 31 hours, 50 minutes and 18 seconds, beating the old record and setting a new one for fastest Canadian-owned boat. And whereas Appold is the first Canadian to win the modern version of the Marblehead race, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate Will Appold on his sailing prowess and his victory, and wish him many more such wins in future sailing competitions. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Kings North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Annapolis Valley Apple Blossom Festival will celebrate its 80th anniversary from May 30th to June 4th, 2012, and whereas the 80th Apple Blossom Festival has been named one of the top 100 North American events for 2012 by the American Bus Association, and whereas the Apple Blossom Festival annually opens Nova Scotia's tourist season with a springtime celebration of the valley's traditions and agricultural heritage, and continues to enjoy national and international recognition, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulates the 80th Annapolis Valley Apple Blossom Festival for being named one of the top 100 North American events for 2012 by the American Bus Association, and for its reputation as the best family event for all Valley communities and visitors. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on November 18, 2011, the 35th Annual Yarmouth County Athletics Awards Banquet was held at Yarmouth Lions Club, and whereas Yarmouth residents Dave McDougall and Terry Murphy won the Nova Scotia Provincial Stick Curling Championships, which took place from February 18th to the 20th, 2011 in Truro, and whereas Dave McDougall and Terry Murphy won team accomplishments for curling in the sport at the 35th Annual Yarmouth County Athletics Awards Banquet, therefore be it resolved, the members of this House of Assembly congratulate Dave McDougall and Terry Murphy and wish them success in future stick curling competitions and thank them for their contribution to sports in Yarmouth. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas John and Teresa Kiley are retiring from VON Pictou County after 13 years of volunteering, and whereas John and Teresa as VON volunteers have earned praise and recognition from both the local community they serve and at a national level, and in 2008 they were VON Volunteers of the Year, and whereas John and Teresa have spent countless hours as VON volunteers providing people with support and comfort, and by their commitment to VON and its clients, they have served their community very well and will be missed. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly thanks John and Teresa Kiley for their 13 years of volunteer work with the VON Pictou County and commends them for making a difference in their community. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Monsieur le Président, pour la présente, j'avise que je proposerai à une date ultérieure l'adoption de la résolution suivante. Attendu que les auteurs qui reprennent l'histoire locale dans nos régions valorisent notre patrimoine. Attendu que M. Édouard Leblanc écrit un livre intitulé « L'Assomption et l'essor des Acadiens en Nouvelle-Écosse », illustrant les communautés acadiennes et leur développement économique au siècle dernier. Attendu que M. Leblanc est bien connu à la Baie-Sainte-Marie pour ses efforts sans relâche dans plusieurs organisations sociales et culturelles. Qu'il soit résolu que les membres de cette Assemblée offrent leurs remerciements à M. Édouard Leblanc pour son dévouement envers la cause acadienne à la Baie-Sainte-Marie et le félicite pour la publication de son livre « L'Assomption et l'essor des Acadiens en Nouvelle-Écosse ». Monsieur le Président, je propose l'adoption de cette résolution sans préavis et sans débat. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas local writers bring attention to our heritage in rural communities, and whereas M. Édouard Leblanc wrote a book titled L'Assomption et l'essor des Acadiens en Nouvelle-Écosse, showing rural Acadian communities and their economic development in the 1900s. And whereas M. Leblanc is well known in Clare for his tireless involvement in many social and cultural organizations, Therefore be resolved that all members of this House of Assembly extend their thanks to Edouard Leblanc for his dedication and hard work to ensure the development of the Acadian heritage and culture in Clare, and congratulate him on the publishing of his book, L'Assomption et l'essor des Acadiens en Nouvelle-Écosse. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester, Musquedoboit Valley.
Thank you. On behalf of the member for Lunenburg, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Lunenburg Queen's Business Excellence Awards are presented annually to recognize, celebrate, and inspire business excellence throughout the region, with participation from 7 different chambers of commerce and boards of trade throughout Lunenburg and Queens counties. And whereas the Large Business Award recognizes a business with 16 or more employees with an established reputation for providing superior customer service while engaging in community support and involvement. And whereas Mahone Auto, located in Blockhouse, Nova Scotia, is a family-owned and family-run car dealership committed to providing service and satisfaction to its customers, therefore be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulates Mahone Auto on their nomination for the Large Business Award from the Lunenburg Queen's Business Excellence Awards. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Wolfville native Don Harrison, a Vice President and Deputy General Counsel at Google Incorporated, returned to Nova Scotia this spring as a guest speaker for Digital Nova Scotia, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to the growth and development of Nova Scotia's digital technologies industry. And whereas Harrison graduated from the University of King's College, studied law at the University of Toronto, and moved to the Silicon Valley in 1999. And whereas Harrison currently helps manage more than 350 staff, handles investments, partnerships, and acquisitions, including such high-profile deals as the acquisition of YouTube and a $700 million bid to buy ITA Software, and provides information to governments and regulators, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate Don Harrison on his considerable accomplishments on the cutting edge of business technology and wish him continued success. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Premier and MLA for Cole Harbour, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas for more than 100 years, boys and girls clubs across Canada have aimed to provide a safe, supportive place where children and young people can experience new opportunities, overcome barriers, build positive relationships, and develop confidence and skills for life. And whereas the Boys and Girls Club of Cole Harbour offers a variety of after-school programs, March break and day camps, and junior leadership training for the children and young people in Cole Harbour and the neighbouring communities. And whereas this past spring, the Boys and Girls Club of Cole Harbour was recognized for its efforts to build stronger, safer communities through a one-time provincial grant to help prevent and reduce crime in the area. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this legislature recognize and thank the staff at the Boys and Girls Club of Cole Harbour and similar organizations across the province for their great work with the next generation of Nova Scotians, and also to the kids involved in the programs for taking the initiative to make life better for the people in their communities, including themselves. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. I will now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, could you please call Bill 102?
Bill 102, the Trade Union Act. I will now recognize the Honourable Member for Argyll, who has 40 minutes left in his debate.
40 minutes. I don't know if I could get, I don't know if I can get my throat cleared in 40 minutes. I know the Deputy Premier is saying a whole bunch here, but maybe, Mr. Speaker, if he just sits and listens attentively, and maybe there'll be a change of heart. That maybe they'll accept the issue of a hoist, as we've been chatting about in the last number of hours, to allow some real consultation to happen on Bill 102. We'll try. I don't think he can be convinced. I think because of course this government has taken the position that they just want to move forward on this one, regardless of the people speaking out against it and about the negative. That they've been hearing about it, not only from us, Mr. Speaker, but also from the business community, job creators in this province, employers in this province that see this as being maybe not the right legislation for this time. So last night, I was talking about a number of organizations and businesses, and I thought maybe it'd be good to maybe start at that position once again and work my way through what our feelings are on Bill 102 insofar as to hold this off for another 6 months so that the Department of Advanced or Labor and Advanced Education can go out and do a little bit more work and maybe propose a number of amendments to Bill 102 or scrap the bill altogether and bring in something brand new. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, Mr. Speaker, that of course can happen when it revolves around Bill 102. We don't have to be, put the blinders on and just go and do something because we don't want to, hurt our pride and saying that we're wrong. Maybe it's time that in this legislature that the government, the opposition, I don't care who, says, maybe you're wrong. Maybe this isn't the right thing. Maybe there are some issues that you're being brought forward that need to be considered in a true consultation process that will, I think, result in a change in this act. So, Mr. Speaker, supporting a hoist motion, and I know that this is being reported by the government as a delay tactic, but quite honestly, again, we feel that by holding it off for 6 months would be a good thing for this process. It'll help inspire business confidence in this province, and Mr. Speaker, we believe this should be a priority because it is very clear and important that our businesses are confident so we can ensure that they can stay here and help us grow our economy. And as you know, many times in this House, a lot of our question periods, of course, are revolving around the issue of job losses in our province. And I know there's a constant go back and forth between us and the Premier and us and the Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism on job numbers. What we are seeing in our rural areas, whether you're in Yarmouth County, in Shelburne County, in Digby County, or whether you're in Cape Breton and you could be in the Pictou, there are, in our estimation and from the numbers that we're seeing off of the Department of Finance's website, that there are job losses happening in rural Nova Scotia. We are seeing I believe, an erosion of employment in our rural areas, moving towards the great city lights because that is where the jobs are. Mr. Speaker, what we're seeing in our rural areas, of course, are people looking at other opportunities in other areas because it is not in their area. They're flying away to Alberta, they're flying away to Saskatchewan, they're flying away to Ontario as they have for many, many years because the opportunities in rural Nova Scotia continue to wane. They continue to erode to the point where many of us, many of on this side of the House, and I'm sure there are many on that side of the House, are really worried for the fabric of their communities. Mr. Speaker, as you know, the fabric of a community is not just the jobs, it's the people that are there that participate day to day in activities in our communities, like being a member of the Lions Club, being a member of the Knights of Columbus, being a member of another organization to volunteer, being a part of the Recreation Commission, you name it, because of that fabric, it is very important that we have those jobs in that area so that they are, alive and well. And I can tell you, because of what we're seeing, because of the job losses, because of what we're seeing and thinking that this bill might induce into rural areas, is that further erosion, is, things like the YMCA in Yarmouth, or things like, the church organizations that are in my constituency. All of them will be losing very valuable volunteers that give of themselves to make sure that others don't go without. That's extremely important. Extremely important. If I look at how things get done in Southwest Nova Scotia, and a lot of times it takes people from outside that can maybe think a little beyond the conventional to get things done. One of the good examples in my neck of the woods anyway was the creation of the Mariner Centre. If it wouldn't have been for those folks coming from outside, because of the jobs that were available or might not be available because of this kind of bill, people came from outside, saw the need for a new rink, and was able to bring the community together in order to bring a facility that, of course, is second to none. Those are the kind of things that, it's beyond the jobs. It's beyond, I believe, what the intention of this bill is. What we feel is will actually, get rid of jobs in Southwest Nova Scotia and all in parts of the province. It will make businesses decide whether they should be investing further, whether they should be creating those jobs that are so important. And again, like I said, it's not just it's just not the employment. It's the added fabric that it creates in all of our communities. Now, excuse me for a moment while I clear my throat. It's the morning. It's the morning. That's what happens. Cheers. Thank you. And I want to thank the Minister of Transportation, while I have a few moments to clear my throat, for his Christmas card. I got a Christmas card. He gave me the first one because he was inspired by my Christmas card. So I want to thank him for the Christmas card. I know not supposed to use a prop, so I'm going to keep this as low as I possibly can. But it's a lovely picture of the Minister of Transportation playing outside in the snow with his granddaughter Ella. It's a wonderful card, and one that I thank the minister for. And as soon as I can get mine together, of course, he'll have my first one. No, this time we're not good. We don't have a bridge. We have actually, I lie. I have a bridge on it, but it's not that bridge. It's actually a beautiful stone bridge in my constituency that, of course, government has helped the local community hold on to. There's very few of these bridges available or left in Nova Scotia. It's not used. It's just simply sitting there. But it's again a beautiful bridge. I'm about the bridges. I can tell you, in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, now the government will try to tell us that they've consulted enough. They say that they've finished up their consultations and should move ahead. But, Mr. Speaker, we believe this isn't true. Let's use the Nova Scotia Employers Roundtable as an example. They don't feel they were adequately consulted. And they represent organizations that employ many Nova Scotians in many parts of this province. So let's look at it in more detail. Has the government actually met and consulted with roundtable members? I asked the question, has the Minister of Labour or the Premier or anyone from the government side reached out and talked to companies like Bowater Mersey, for example? Have they discussed first contract arbitration with them? I know, again, with the issue going on at Bowater, that maybe that didn't get broached, but did it happen in the conversations? What about Clearwater Fine Food? Clearwater is an important company with a history here in Nova Scotia. Surely they deserve some consultation. And there are hundreds of fishing companies just like Clearwater that employ, hundreds of people. I was talking last night about Crossley Tandis, another important participant at the Employers Roundtable. I wonder what they would think of first contract arbitration. Does the government know? Have they taken the time to ask? Here's an interesting fact. Irving is a participant on the Employers Roundtable, as we all know. Now, we all know about the $25 billion shipbuilding contract. Of course, we were all excited about it. We all supported that process in this House of Assembly, and rightly so. But in the years to come, Irving will have some very important decisions to make. They're all going to have to subcontract a lot of that work. And when they're deciding where some of that work will go, how can we ensure that it'll be done here in Nova Scotia? I'm glad I have the attention of the minister. I'm glad we have the attention of the minister. So, Mr. Speaker, the truth is we can't be sure of that, but what we can do is create an environment where Irving wants that work to be done here, where it's advantageous for that work to be done here in Nova Scotia. You know, the further issue on that one is that as the subcontract stuff will start to happen, many of these companies will have to grow. And as they grow, and as they need more staff, as they need more employees, you know, they might fall into the issue of first contract arbitration. Are they ready for that kind of commitment? And will that impact, finally, the availability or the pricing of that product? That's sort of the question. It's not an issue of just the first contract, but is it the actual setup of a company? Because there will be a number of new companies that will have to be created to provide certain services and or products for the shipbuilding contract. And there's things that we can do to make that happen, Mr. Speaker. We can lower taxes. We can get to work to lower power rates, as has been discussed in this legislature on many occasions. And we can lessen the regulatory burden that businesses face. But there are also some things that we can do to make it harder for Irving to send work here too, to make it harder for Irving to justify sending work to Nova Scotia. And we feel, again, one of these things is first contract arbitration. Another member of the roundtable is Sobeys. Sobeys employs Nova Scotians from one end of this province to another. Sobeys has a deeply rooted history in Nova Scotia. You know, of course, their head offices and you know, their beginnings happened in New Glasgow, Stellarton. And have done a phenomenal job in not only growing in Nova Scotia, but of course growing right across Canada. So are we willing to sacrifice that deeply rooted history with first contract arbitration? Because we believe that that could find its way into the workplace of Sobeys. These are the kinds of questions the government should spend some time pondering before they move ahead with this bill. And that's why it's important. We need to go talk to these folks. We need to have answers, maybe from this government and from this minister, on how those discussions have gone. You know, I talked about Walmart the other night. Walmart, another large employer in Nova Scotia today. There's been many examples discussed here in the House where Walmart in other jurisdictions, and I'm thinking about Quebec in particular, where Walmart has simply moved jobs and closed down departments because the first contract was imposed upon them. Do we want that happening to Walmarts here in Nova Scotia? Do you think that we could afford that to happen in our rural communities? Many of those jobs are, you know, a very basic job, but they're very important jobs for many Nova Scotians who have the opportunity to, you know, work on the floor, work in cash, work in their garages, you know, in the tire services and the things that they offer that are important. And not only is it important to the employees there, but it is also important to the population because they do get some of these services at a more reduced cost than maybe they can get in other places in their communities. There's a lot more. There's a lot of other members of the Employers Roundtable who we feel don't feel that they've been consulted properly. Organizations like Dalhousie University, ECPLP, Farmers Dairy, IMP, Killam Properties, Medivie Blue Cross, Michelin, Mount St. Vincent University, Dexter's, Nova Scotia Power itself, Oxford Fine Frozen Foods, Scotia Investments, Scotsburns Dairy, the Shaw Group. You know, Mr. Speaker, we feel that they all deserve a say. So let's do that. Let's take the time to say, why doesn't the Minister of Labour and Premier pick up the phone and ask them what they think of first contract arbitration and report it back to this legislature? Mr. Speaker, many times in this House of Assembly, we've seen organizations come in opposition to this bill, and I think they should be put into the record as well. Many times we've seen Atlantic Building Supply Dealers Association. We've seen many times the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, who do represent organizations from one end of this province to another. The Canadian Restaurant and Food Services Association, the Construction Association, the Taxpayers Association, the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, the Hotel Association. There's, of course, the Merit Contractors Association of Nova Scotia, the Nova Scotia Automobile Dealers Association, Nova Scotia Chambers of Commerce, the Nova Scotia Home Builders Association, the Nova Scotia Road Builders Association, the Restaurant Association, the Retail Council of Canada, the Atlantic office, Sackville Business Association, Scotia Group of Companies, the Tourism Industry Association of Nova Scotia, the Truro and District Chamber of Commerce. They've all come forward to oppose this legislation, and combined, these groups employ thousands upon thousands of Nova Scotians. So why has this government, in our mind, and what we've seen, have refused to work with them on this? Mr. Speaker, they say the same thing, I think. We don't need first contract arbitration right now. It won't make the process better. It won't help the process. It makes things worse. Not only does this legislation have the potential to disrupt well-functioning businesses, but it will, of course, disrupt a process that disrupts collective bargaining. What it does, it deprives the parties of finality and the most important contract that they'll ever negotiate. The Employers' Roundtable said it best. Of course, I quote, "A collective agreement imposed by first contract arbitration does not promote free, constructive bargaining process," end of quote. So that's I think, a very, very bold statement, but it's an accurate one. So let's think about what that means. Let's take the time to consider the potential consequences of that bill. That's what a hoist, in our mind, will allow us to do. We'll go back and talk to the folks that really need to be consulted on this issue. The folks that believe that this does not promote free, constructive bargaining processes. I mean, I don't know how many times in this House we've heard that from that government when they were in opposition about letting the process run its due course, let the process do its work. And Mr. Speaker, many times they were right in that. So why all of a sudden do they want to change the water on the beans and bring in first contract arbitration? We should take more time to look at what first contract arbitration has done to businesses in other jurisdictions. Now let's take 6 months and, of course, examine this. In Quebec, only 47% of first contract arbitrations are actually followed by a second collective agreement, and only 24% are followed by a third. Very telling numbers when you really start splitting it up like that, because we're so anxious and excited to get to that first agreement that it seems like we're not getting beyond that first agreement for a number of reasons. In most cases, employers and employees are stuck with that first contract, whether good or bad. There's no more negotiation, and Mr. Speaker, we feel that negotiation is important. It brings people to the table, fosters sound relationship. All of this is critical to building strong labor relations into the future. We should be encouraging negotiation and bargaining. It's how we build long-term relationships in this matter. And like I said, many times in this House of Assembly, especially when I was Minister of Health, did I hear that party talk about good labor relations and trying to maintain that and you know, respecting the process. So all of a sudden we want to completely change the process, whether good or bad. We need a system that favors one side it creates a system that favors one side over the other. We feel that it does not foster healthy relationships. It creates unhealthy environment. Make no mistake about it, first contract arbitration is not a neutral process. It tilts the balance in favor of labor. And I'm not opposed to collective bargaining, as I've said. I'm not opposed to employees unionizing if that's their wish, not at all. Our position is only that it ought to be done in a manner that is open and transparent, that works really hard to bring both sides to the table in good faith, and they work together to reach a deal that they both can live with. So, you know, what's wrong with the existing process that actually we feel has accomplished that time and time and time again in this province? We're sent to this House to find solutions to problems. That's why our constituencies hire us and send us here, Mr. Speaker. But in this case, the government is forging ahead with a solution to a problem that we don't have. We have other mechanisms that are used to reach collective agreements. We have proof that, of course, they work well. First contract arbitration is not a frequently used method of resolving disputes, even in jurisdictions that do use it. So let's look at Ontario as an example. In Ontario, where unions must demonstrate a failure to bargain in good faith, order to get them a first contract imposed upon them, arbitration is resorted to in no less than 1% of cases. And Ontario has, of course, more labor disruptions than Nova Scotia ever does. So the question is still there. Why are we looking to pass Bill 102 right now? Like right now? Is this the most important bill on the government's docket? You know, why is this legislation before us? The government may feel a need, you know, to humor their special interest friends, but it is the only case that I can see of why this piece of legislation is before us today. And since there is no credible need for this legislation right now, I mean, how many organizations are out there that are having trouble negotiating their contracts that we need to bring this in right now? Well, there are none. Absolutely none. You know, in 10 years, you know, have they ever had to go to some kind of extra arbitration or some kind of extra involvement? It was like 3 times in 10 years. There is no pressing issue today that requires this bill to be passed in the sitting of the legislature. You know, listen, our bosses, which are, of course, our constituents, are telling us to wait. And I don't know about the members on the government side, but the bosses are the people that I represent. May they have other bosses, maybe they're listening to other forces, but I'm listening to the people of the constituency. And they're telling me to wait. They're telling me they don't want us to move ahead with first contract arbitration. So I hope that the members of the government side will stop for a moment when they think about the people who sent them there. Think about the people of Cape Breton Nova. Think about the people of Lunenburg West. Think about the people of Pictou Centre. Do they want first contract arbitration? And if they do, well, you know, let us know who those folks are. You know, stand and tell us. This is being brought forward in my community, and it's something that is very important. Do they want first contract arbitration? And I'm willing to bet that they don't, if you actually went out and consulted with them. But how can we be sure? Because of the manner in which I think this bill has arrived here in the legislature. So taking 6 months, allowing the member of this House, allowing all members of this House. Minister of Finance was playing with the desk there and, of course, dropped it. Your fingers are okay? You didn't catch your fingers in there? We still have a couple of paramedics. I know we still have a couple of paramedics here. We'd be all right if he did hurt his fingers there. It'd be very hard to count, I suppose all the budgeting he does, to count on 9 fingers instead of 10. So, Mr. Speaker, taking 6 months, allowing the members of this House to go home and consult would be able to know them for sure. And Mr. Speaker, if they come to us and say, listen, this group and that group has said that we really need this kind of first contract arbitration, that there's this company and that company that are deadlocked at reaching a first contract agreement, well then okay. All right, well at least we've got more data than what we started here with a week or so ago when we started debating this bill. But it just goes to the issue that good legislation isn't rushed. Good legislation takes, of course, time to develop. Good legislation requires proper consultation with relevant stakeholders and important groups. And again, we feel that this is not good legislation. Many organizations and companies in our constituencies, could fall prey or could fall to this issue. If I look at the fishing industry as an example, many fishing companies are maybe a little smaller than what Clearwater is, but they do still employ a number of people. If I look at, in my mind, inshore fisheries or Acadian fish processors, or even Sea Life, which is a division of Camo Seafoods, they employ many people. In the case of Acadian Fish and inshore, each of them on their floors would probably employ 30 people or more, depending on the time of year that they require to work on their product. I'd really like to take some more time and go back and talk to those individuals and see if this legislation will help or hinder. Because I know the relationship that these companies have with their employees is absolutely phenomenal. And I spoke about this the other day, especially about the herring workers at Sea Life Fisheries, or Sea Life in East Pubnico division of Camo Seafoods. But, many of these small town businesses work very hard with their employees to make sure that they have what they need, and make sure that they have the hours that are required to at least qualify for employment insurance, who make sure that they are not going to be left out in the cold. And what that fosters many times is more than just a job, but in a lot of cases it's sort of their careers. I know many people that work at these organizations that have been with these companies for 20 years, 30 years, in some cases even longer, because the company has treated them so well, has made sure that they've had their hours, has made sure that they've had their vacations, has made sure that they've had gifts at their weddings. So what does first contract arbitration do for companies like this? I don't think it does anything at all. I think it does create an opportunity for a souring relationship there, so that there isn't that same kind of friendliness between employers and employees. And I think that's wrong, especially in small communities like mine. Again, if I look at the Pubnicos and the Acadian fishes and the inshore fisheries, are the fabric of our communities, as I spoke a little earlier. They've been there through thick and thin. They've been there in ups and downs of the fisheries. They've been there when other companies were closing their doors, when other smaller fish companies had nothing else to do but to close things up. These organizations found ways to make sure their employees had everything that they needed. So what does first contract arbitration do for them? Again, I really think it does very little. I spoke at the beginning of the week about Sea Life, and I think this is a really good example of employee-employer relationship that is well beyond what we're used to, and what I think this government hasn't seen in the past. And that is that, Sea Life last year I know the Minister of Fishery knows this one very well. Last year, the fish stock of herring could not be found. I know the boats went out time after time after time trying to find the schools of herring in order to put through their plants. And really what happened was, because there was no hours, and there's about, and I forget how many people that actually work there. I think it's like 100 people, I think, that normally work throughout the summer. You know, of course, making up their hours, making sure that they have the dollars available so they can get them through the winter. Maybe they go off to maybe do some lobster fishing or whatever. But many, of course, of the women that work there, for example, are you know, in their 50s, and really the options in our neck of the woods are very limited. Anyway, last year they couldn't find any fish, and even worse from the herring stock was the issue that they couldn't even find mackerel in the States. And what had happened in the States is the mackerel supply normally gives a number of weeks, you know, 4, 5, 6 weeks to those employees before the herring begins, or the herring fishery begins here off of Halifax, as a matter of fact. Anyway, last year there was no work, and many people found themselves weeks and weeks short of being able to draw for their unemployment. And what the company did, you know, what the company did is they tried their best in trying to find other things to do, which included cleaning the plant, which included trying to get the boxes ready, which, you know, it was a pile of stuff. And I kudos to Sea Life and to the principals there that worked with their employees to find things for them to do. But they still came up short. And what the government did at the time, and again, I've thanked the Minister of Fisheries in this House a number of times about this one, is that they were able to find some dollars to help out and find other jobs that they could do in the community. And it could have been anything from, you know, painting somebody's house to cleaning homes, or it was just, you know, they found things for them to do, and they flowed it through, of course, that company. And lo and behold, the employees were able to have their hours so that they could draw for employment insurance. Now this year we were getting all ramped up to do that again because it seemed that the supply, or the schools of fish were not available. They caught some here off of Halifax, but they were really having a hard time finding it in the Bay of Fundy, off of Scott's Bay, and those areas. And there was no work. But you know, happily, through the perseverance of Camo Seafoods and the fishermen that, of course, work for them, hours were found. The fish was found, and you know, many tons of herring were run through the plant in East Pubnico, and all those folks were able to find the hours, or work the hours that are required. So what that really you know, orchestrates or shows is that there is really very few companies that would have labor problems or labor relation problems with their employees, that companies would have problems with them, which I think, you know, in the intention of this bill is that it's supposed to fix this, that it's giving the opportunity, because everybody seems to be at a loggerhead all the time, so we need to give a mechanism to come through on this one. But from the examples that I'm giving, from the examples that we've heard from other people, that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist in rural Nova Scotia. That doesn't exist in my community. And I don't think it actually exists in many communities of members of the government side. Mr. Speaker, again, it goes to the point that you know, good legislation isn't something that we should rush. It isn't something that, you know, just because you have an idea doesn't mean it's a good one. It's something that, you know, the idea needs to be fully fleshed out, that it needs to be consulted and worked with to make sure that it is the right piece of legislation for all of Nova Scotia, not just, you know, one part of Nova Scotia over another. And what we feel, again, you know, even after, you know, many questions in this House of Assembly, you know, we felt that we had asked, you know, a few questions around first contract arbitration, because, of course, it wasn't a bill before this House. You know, the specter of it had been brought forward and had been talked about by organizations and groups, had been talked about by the minister and the department. But we were able to ask questions about it, and you know, what we had heard, which was in my mind respectful. You know, we got a regular, you know, a decent answer from the minister that said, you know, we're still consulting, we're still talking about it. It is still before the Labor Relation Management Committee, and so, you know, we accepted that as being at least a relatively good process in which, you know, consultation could continue to be had, and you know, we were hoping that, of course, other organizations could have been brought into that process. Other companies could be consulted with. But what we saw is something that is really no surprise, or has turned into be no surprise for us about this government, is that it was brought hastily in. You know, hastily simply meaning that, you know, we don't think the work had been done. That because of commitments that were made, or, you know, again, thinking that this was a good thing or a good idea, that it should be brought in and of course, rammed through the legislature. Well, Mr. Speaker, you know, I know we're trying to do the best that we can to make sure that this isn't. I wish that the government, again, would take the opportunity to maybe rethink this. You know, we are in, I believe, an economic crisis. We've all talked about it in this legislature, and all we can do, I think, as legislators, as MLAs, is to create an environment in which businesses can grow. Businesses and employees and people can be at work, can make sure that they have the opportunity to contribute to their communities. That's what I believe we should be doing as MLAs. And I think in this particular case, this one, if we're not using, if it's not fixed, then why are we trying to fix it? If it's not something that's been asked for by our communities, then why are we bringing this forward? You know, let's be talking about things like creating jobs, making sure we're creating the right environment for the Irving shipbuilding contract. Let's be talking about other things that are important to Nova Scotians. You know, let's talk about long-term care. Let's talk about, you know, working with persons with disabilities. Let's talk about employment insurance. Let's talk about a number of issues that we hear every day in our constituency offices. Let's talk about roads, you know. As I said yesterday, I mean, I think the Department of Transportation did a phenomenal job in getting the road cleared in a relatively good time. You know, it's not what everybody expects, because they want it done immediately, but I think they did a great job. My travels from Port Hawkesbury back home were phenomenal on the roads. So let's talk about those things. Let's talk about things that are important to Nova Scotians, things that we hear every day in our constituencies. Mr. Speaker, all I can ask of the government is to listen. I hope they've listened over the last number of hours to our pleas to hold it back. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to guess that they're not, that they're just going to do what their leaders are telling them to do, which is to accept this at all costs. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the legislature, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak to this hoist motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The motion is that the motion for second reading of Bill 102 be amended by deleting all the words after the word that and substituting the following therefore. Bill 102, an act to prevent unnecessary labor disruptions and protect the economy by amending Chapter 475 of the Revised Statute 1989, the Trade Union Act. Be now read a second time, but put that it be read a second time this day 6 months hence. Is the host ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Nay. The motion is defeated. Motion is defeated. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Please call the main motion, Bill 102, please, Mr. Speaker.
The second reading of Bill 102. I will now recognize the Honourable Member for Clare.
Pardon me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise and say a few words on second reading on Bill 102. Mr. Speaker, the first question that comes to mind is why did the NDP government bring this piece of legislation forward? You know, we've heard time and time again who has been asking the government for first contract arbitration legislation. Mr. Speaker, I was looking forward when the Minister of Labour and Advanced Education introduced second reading on this bill, that she was going to tell us why the government was bringing this piece of legislation forward, and at the same time, who was asking for this to come forward. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you I don't know of anyone in Clare that has been asking for first contract arbitration. I can tell you I've heard from a few businesses from Clare in this last weekend, asking me basically why was government bringing this legislation forward, and at the same time, who was asking for it. So I can tell you some businesses at home have been following this discussion, this debate. However, unfortunately, we don't know the answers to these questions. Mr. Speaker, what we're trying, I guess the big question is, what are we trying to fix? You know, with this, what are we trying to fix with this piece of legislation? Is there problems with labor relations in our province? You know, it has been said time and time again, we have very good labor relations in our province. You know, I'm not aware of any labor difficulties in our province at this current time. So again, we're trying to find out, you know, what this bill will end up fixing. Mr. Speaker, maybe we'll know once the the Minister of Labour wraps up discussion on second reading on this bill, hopefully today. Again, I hope, and I would certainly like the Minister to, if she has an opportunity, to tell us again why she's bringing this bill forward when she wraps up her closing comments on Bill number 102, Mr. Speaker. So in the end, I guess, you know, what is the Minister trying or planning to fix with this bill? You know, again, as I've pointed out, you know, are there problems with labor relations in our province? So I guess the real big question that everyone's been asking is, why is this bill good for Nova Scotians? We haven't heard that, Mr. Speaker. You know, why? What's really good about this bill coming forward? In the end, what this bill will help fixing, we're not aware of any problem at the moment. Mr. Speaker, the people of Nova Scotia would be interested, I'm sure they would be interested in hearing the Minister telling us why this bill is good for our province. I guess one big question that many people will have, will this bill help create jobs in our province? You know, time and time again, we've been hearing throughout this session this fall, Mr. Speaker, about people losing their jobs. So when you look at the title of this bill, an act to prevent unnecessary labor disruptions and protect the economy, you know, it talks about protecting the economy in Nova Scotia. It's talk about protecting jobs. You know, Mr. Speaker, we know since the NDP government took office 2.5 years ago, we have lost over 12,500 jobs in our province. I hear the Minister of Finance, telling us that these numbers are only made up. Well, again, we've heard from different sources, probably the number is probably greater than 12,500. In the past year alone, Mr. Speaker, Cape Breton lost 2,100 jobs. The North Shore region lost 1,400 jobs. The Valley region lost over 600 jobs. The Southwestern region lost over 2,500 jobs. So, Mr. Speaker, if this bill is about protecting our economy in our province, I wish the Minister of Labour and Advanced Education could tell us exactly how this bill is going to protect our economy. I'm sure there's many people out there that are probably wondering the same thing as I am. How is this going to protect the economy in our province? Again, as I've said, we have lost over 12,500 jobs in our province since the NDP government has been in office in the last 2.5 years. It seems every week, Mr. Speaker, every week we hear of someone else losing their jobs, laying off employees around the province, whether it's in the Strait area, on the South Shore, in Yarmouth, and throughout many communities, throughout rural, especially rural Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. So again, why is the government not focusing on these real economic issues facing our province rather than bringing Bill 102 before the House, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, if this bill is going to protect our economy, again, how is this bill going to stop people from losing their jobs? I wish the Minister of Labour could tell us and all Nova Scotians how this bill is going to protect our economy. Mr. Speaker, government has a role in helping to work with the businesses that are in our province to create good jobs for Nova Scotians, throughout all our province, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that first contract arbitration legislation will help the government work with our businesses to create good jobs in our province. And if it does, if this bill does create good jobs for Nova Scotians, then why is the government not telling us, Mr. Speaker? If this is about protecting the economy and if first contract arbitration legislation will create good jobs for Nova Scotians, I wish somebody from the government benches, Mr. Speaker, could tell us and tell all Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that first contract arbitration will increase business confidence in our province. We are losing too many jobs, and also to risk business confidence, Mr. Speaker, at this time, I believe that the government should certainly look at the number of people that are losing their jobs very closely. It's, again, many people are asking why is this bill, Mr. Speaker, before the House. The government should be using their energy to strengthen our economy and get Nova Scotians back to work. We know that over 12,000 people have lost their job. And I don't believe that first contract arbitration will encourage businesses to expand and invest in our province, Mr. Speaker. I don't believe that first contract arbitration will contribute to better economic performance or economic stability for our province. In the past year alone, Mr. Speaker, 5,000 Nova Scotians have left the workforce. We have heard time and time again the government about, we need to focus on making sure that we do have a solid workforce for now and for years to come. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, we have over 5,000 Nova Scotians that have left the workforce. In Cape Breton, 2,300 people have left the workforce. In the North Shore, 1,400 people have left the workforce. In the Valley, 1,800 people have left the workforce. In the southwestern Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, over 4,300 people have left the workforce. Again, I don't know that first contract arbitration will encourage people to stay in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. People want to work, and they need to work, and they will go wherever they have to go in order to find work. So, Mr. Speaker, in closing, Mr. Speaker, when I look at the loss of 12,500 jobs in our province in the last 2.5 years, when I looked at the 5,000 Nova Scotians who have left the workforce in the past year alone, again, the question is, why is the government not focusing their energy on helping creating jobs, more jobs in our province, and really protecting the economy, as Bill number 102 states, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I will take my seat. Thank you kindly.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise in my place today to speak to Bill 102, an amendment to the Trade Union Act, and it's entitled, An Act to Prevent Unnecessary Labour Disruption and Protect the Economy by amending Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes of Nova Scotia. So, I guess over here, what we've been wondering is, in what particular way are they protecting the economy in this bill? We have had very few labour disruptions. First contract negotiation has not, by and large, been an issue in this province over the past decade. So why this? Why now? The Nova Scotia economy is weak. We know that we're bleeding jobs. My caucus, the Liberal caucus, has stood up here day after day talking about job losses in this province. We should be focusing our energies on bringing investment to this province and boosting business confidence. Instead, we're going to make it more difficult for business to come in here. We are going to make it more difficult for companies with first contract negotiation. We keep asking, what is the problem that the minister is trying to fix? In Nova Scotia, because there are lots of problems, but this bill isn't going to fix any of them. In 2010, Nova Scotia had the worst growth of any provincial economy in the country at 1.9%. Only Northwest Territories had lower GDP. In the last year, we had the third worst economic performance in manufacturing in the country. The worst performance, for example, in motor vehicle sales. Since taking office, the NDP, since the NDP took the office, is that all I get? Gas prices have gone up over 25 cents a litre. Well, as a matter of fact, it did go up in other provinces, but I think, Mr. Finance Minister, if you happen to check what gas prices are in other provinces, they're not as high as they are here. And certainly diesel has skyrocketed, as I was noting the other day. Employment has decreased by, employment has decreased by 12,500 jobs since the NDP took office, and we could go through the list once again. Cape Breton lost over 2,000 jobs. North Shore region lost almost 1,500 jobs. Valley region lost 600 jobs. Southern region lost 2,500 jobs. And in the past year alone, 5,000 Nova Scotians have exited the workforce. But you know what? You don't have to take my word for it that this bill isn't needed. We have heard from a number of employers or employers groups in this province, the Atlantic Building Supply Dealers Association, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, the Canadian Restaurant and Food Services Association, the Construction Association of Nova Scotia, the Contact Centre Nova Scotia, Halifax Chamber of Commerce, Merit Contractors Association of Nova Scotia, Nova Scotia Automobile Dealers Association, Nova Scotia Chambers of Commerce, Nova Scotia Home Builders Association, Nova Scotia Road Builders Association, PharmaSave Atlantic, Restaurant Association of Nova Scotia, the Retail Council of Canada Atlantic Office, and the Scotia Group of Companies. And they have said on behalf of their tens of thousands of employers in Nova Scotia, they do not want first contract arbitration. They've made it clear. Since 1998, the Labour Board, they go on to say, has only issued 3 orders to bargain. So there's not some overwhelming problem. It's not like there have been 2,500 issues to bargain or orders to bargain. It's not like, in terms of weightiness, the job losses far outweigh what we're doing here. And so instead of focusing on what a government should be doing, creating jobs, they are in fact looking at something that will inhibit companies from moving here, from setting up here, from expanding. They point out that Nova Scotia is experiencing an uncertain future. Economic growth and even stability are not a given, and we know that Nova Scotians are concerned about their jobs. They don't know if they're going to have a job in 6 months or a year. We should be creating an environment of opportunity that provides young people with a choice of remaining in this province. And instead, what we're doing is we're inhibiting employers. My colleague, the member for Colchester North, received a number of submissions from employers in her constituency and around. And I have letters here which I would like to table from Masstown Market. Masstown Market opened in 1969, and they currently employ 120 people. Home Hardware in her constituency opened in 1980. They have 230 employees. Central Freightliners opened in 2000. They have 31 employees. And A&H Fabricated in Oxford opened in 1999. They have 15 employees. And they wrote to her, and this is what they said: "Dear Karen, I am writing you today to outline disappointment with government's plan to bring first contract arbitration to Nova Scotia. I am disappointed this is being done despite the opposition of businesses, large and small, across the province. I view both the legislation and the process that drove it as anti-business, and as such urge you to reconsider. As we have repeatedly heard, we have a harmonious labour environment in Nova Scotia and are fortunate to experience one of the fewest numbers of days lost due to labour disruptions in Canada. We simply do not have a problem that needs fixing. For this reason alone, I want to stress my opposition to first contract arbitration, and that there are much more pressing issues that demand our attention, such as economic growth and job creation." And may I point out that this is exactly what the Liberal Party has been saying. There are other things we should be focusing on. But back to the letter. The tools are already at government's disposal to deal with the rare circumstance where first contracts cannot be settled. I believe we should be exploring existing tools before introducing legislation we do not need. I fear that introducing FCA at this fragile time may well serve to hurt the economy by adding uncertainty to an already uncertain environment. I will acknowledge that most Canadians live in jurisdictions where FCA exists. This seems to be the consistent argument put forth in favour of FCA. On this point, I would like to clarify that while 85% of Canadians live in jurisdictions that have some form of FCA, only 4% have the model of FCA that is being proposed for Nova Scotia. The Manitoba model of FCA, after which Nova Scotia's version of FCA is being fashioned, is widely viewed as the most regressive, given that there is little time or even requirement for both parties to make every effort possible to reach an agreement on their own. I believe this undermines the ability of both parties to engage in free collective bargaining, a right we hold dear. For all of these reasons, I urge you to reconsider and act to prevent unnecessary labour disruptions and protect the economy, and ask that the government instead focus on measures we can work on together to improve labour relations in Nova Scotia while growing the economy. I do not believe FCA will achieve either. And Mr. Speaker, that is the whole point here. That is the whole point here, that we don't think that this particular bill is going to do what Nova Scotians need, what Nova Scotia needs right now. What this bill will do is inhibit business from moving in, from staying here, from upgrading their plants. And what it does not do is it spends no time on making our labor milieu more harmonious. In fact, what we've done is we've now, once again, this government has pitted labor against business again. There wasn't a problem to start. There was no need to bring this in, and yet this is where we're going now. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I do urge the government to reconsider its decision to bring in FCA and its particular decision to bring in this particular model of FCA, and request that they would, in fact, think again and move in another direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and please today to rise in my place for a short period just to make a few points on this very, very important bill that is before us, and one that is cause for concern. First of all, I guess in my riding that has a Michelin plant, I certainly, am hearing that they don't like this bill. They don't like the possibility of what this bill could produce. On the weekend, my honourable colleague from Kings South was at the radio station for the Christmas Miracle, Kinsman Christmas Miracle show. I just entered the door of that building, and a Michelin worker who was volunteering that day came to ask me in simplest terms what kind of implications this could have. You know, we have a good work environment. There has been initiatives in the past to unionize Michelin. No, let's not hide from that. That's been one of their favorite targets. And what this bill actually does, is support that initiative. A little bit of a roundabout way, but it does change the environment. And I think even to raise a bill that has a company like Michelin, and I heard last night the same story. I was actually quite taken back when I arrived at the Federation of Agriculture meeting last night, and a farmer from Pictou came to chat with me on not about agriculture, which I thought was going to be the topic, but about, again, what kind of impact could Bill 102 have on the secure jobs, the importance of the Michelin plant in Pictou. And so there's not a great amount of public discussion, obviously from Michelin, but you know that at the worker level there is talk about this bill. There is talk about the implications that it could have. And I think for I know my riding in particular, and anybody representing Kings County or Pictou County or Lunenburg, this is a bill that I think does have that undercurrent in regards to how this Bill 102 could indeed impact. I was surprised to see this bill come along. I know we keep hearing that it is in other provinces. This exact first contract arbitration does exist, and also at the federal level. But, you know, the current climate in Nova Scotia, the work climate, especially in rural Nova Scotia, really should be front and center of government's agenda during this session. You know, while we have lost a lot on the agri-manufacturing in the Annapolis Valley, it's, you know, this fall, again, as you start in Windsor with the gypsum mines, and you move to Hantsport and up through the valley all the way to Digby, we've had those 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 jobs. Even the town of Berwick, with no manufacturing now, has had to lay off some people from their from the town employees. So this is the kind of environment now that we're living in, and this is a bill which does create that discomfort for small business. And so I think it's come at a very, very unfortunate time. You know, also in Nova Scotia, we have a good track record. We have a good labor history. I think it goes to show that people are reasonable in negotiating their contracts. There is an occasional time, I think 3 times in the last 10 years, when we've had to call upon some kind of arbitration to enter the picture for settlement. So I think, Mr. Speaker, that as we hear from the small business community, I think we need to perhaps have a strong second look, and I hope to speak further on this bill as it moves through the process of the House. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
If I recognize the Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education, it will be to close debate on second reading of Bill 102.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the members for their thoughts on this particular piece of legislation, and I move that we adjourn debate on Bill 102.
No.
So, sorry, move second reading.
Second reading, yeah.
And move the bill along to law amendments. Thank you.
The question is for second reading of Bill 102, the Trade Union Act. Is the House ready for the question? We will now take a short break, or ring the bells until the whips are satisfied. satisfied? A recorded vote has been called for, so I will now ask the clerks to take the vote.
Mr. Landry? Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Estabrook?
Aye.
Ms. Peterson-Rayfuse?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mr. Dexter?
Absent.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald? Mr. Paris?
Yes.
Ms. Jennings?
Yes.
Mr. McDonnell?
Yes.
Mr. Beliveau?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira? Ms. Zan?
Yes.
Ms. Kent?
Yes.
Ms. Conrad?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond? Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Epstein?
Aye.
Mr. Press?
Yes.
Mr. Ramey?
Yes.
Mr. Skabar?
Yes.
Mr. Wynot?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Ms. Birdsall?
Yes.
Mr. Boudreau?
Yes.
Mr. Burrell?
Yes.
Ms.
No.
Mr. Sampson? Mr. Glavine?
No.
Ms. Whalen?
No.
Mr. McNeil?
No.
Mr. McDonald? Mr. D'Entremont?
No.
Mr. Bailey?
No.
Mr. Bain? Mr. Porter?
No.
Mr. McMaster?
No.
Mr. McLeod?
No.
Mr. Oral? Mr. Younger? Ms. Regan?
No.
Ms. Casey?
No.
Mr. Caldwell?
No.
Mr. Zink?
Absent.
Mr. Terrio? Mr. McClellan? Mr. Churchill?
Nay.
Your accountants can figure he can read numbers anywhere.
Those in favor of the motion, 25. Those against, 13.
Motion is carried. Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. I will now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish you'd now leave the chair and the House resolve itself in the whole House on bills.
Carried. We will now take a short recess until the committee sets up. Thank you. I'm not.
please. Committee of the whole House on Bills will come to order. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, could you please call Bill number 65, Nova Scotia Job Funds Act?
Call Bill number 65, the Nova Scotia Job Funds Act. Question has been called. All in favour? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. I'm sorry. One moment, please.
Madam Chair, just to advise the committee that there was an amendment in law amendments to this bill. On page 4, clause 12, section 14A, line 2, the letter B was deleted and the word by was substituted. And the bill has 14 clauses.
Thank you. So the clerk has described the amendments. Question has been called. Shall clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall the remaining clauses carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, could you please call Bill number 73, the Safer School Zones Act?
I now call Bill number 73, the Safer School Zones Act.
Madam Chair, this bill has 8 clauses and was referred without amendment.
Question has been called. Shall the clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall the remaining clauses carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, could you please call Bill number 76, the Civil Forfeiture Act?
I now call Bill number 76, the Civil Forfeiture Act.
Madam Chair, Bill 76 has 1 clause and was referred back without amendment.
Question has been called. Shall clause number 1 carry? Shall the remaining clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, could you please call Bill number 78, the Civil Constables Act?
I now call Bill number 78, the Civil Constables Act.
Madam Chair, this bill also has 1 clause and was also referred back without amendments.
Question has been called. Shall clause number 1 carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. Recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, would you please call Bill number 80, the Constables Act?
I now call Bill number 80, the Constables Act.
Madam Chair, Bill number 80 has 1 clause and was referred back from the Law Amendments Committee without amendments.
Question has been called. Shall clause 1 carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, could you please call Bill number 84, the Animal Protections Act?
I now call Bill number 84, the Animal Protection Act.
Madam Chair, Bill number 84 has 23 clauses and was referred back from law amendments without amendments.
Question has been called. Shall clause number 1 carry? Carry. Shall the remaining clauses carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, could you please call Bill number 85, the Agricultural Rural Credit Act?
I now call Bill number 85, the Agricultural and Rural Credit Act.
Madam Chair, this bill has 7 clauses and it was referred back from law amendments without amendment.
Question has been called. Shall clause number 1 carry? Carry. Shall the remaining clauses carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Chair, I wish the committee to now rise and report progress.
The motion is carried. The committee will now rise to report business to the House. Order, please. The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on Bills reports
that the Committee of the Whole has met and considered the following bills. Bills 73, 76, 78, 80, 84, and 85 without amendments. Bill 65, which was reported with certain amendments by the Committee on Law Amendments to the Committee of the Whole without further amendments. And the Chairman has been instructed to recommend these bills to the favourable consideration of the House.
Thank you. Ordered that these bills be read for a third time on a future day. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, could you please call bills for second reading?
Bills for second reading. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, could you please call Bill 94, the Atlantic Provinces Special Education Authority Act?
I now call Bill number 94. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to move second reading of Bill 94, an act to amend Chapter 194 of the Revised Statutes of 1989, the Atlantic Provinces Education Authority Act. Madam Speaker, the Atlantic Provinces Special Education Authority is an interprovincial cooperative agency that was established in 1975 through joint agreement by the Ministers of Education for Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland and Labrador. The Atlantic Provinces Special Education Authority was given the mandate to provide educational services, programs, and opportunities for people from birth to 21 years of age who are hearing or visually impaired and live in any of the Atlantic provinces. Madam Speaker, this arrangement is a model of inter-provincial cooperation and is a wonderful example of the great work that can happen through partnership and a shared vision for helping those in need. The program is operated by a board of directors that include representation from all provinces, and its operational costs are also shared. Madam Speaker, this program has supported many young people achieve success both in the classroom and in life. It is a program that Nova Scotia is proud to be a part of. Madam Speaker, this amendment was developed in cooperation with our Atlantic partners and updates the current legislation to reflect current language and to reflect the current facilities now held by the authority. Madam Speaker, some of the facilities and programs currently referenced in the Act no longer exist, and others should be updated in the Act. A new office has been established on the South Street in Halifax and is also not mentioned in the current Act. So I would like to be clear. These amendments in no way change, alter, or affect the programs and services being provided to those students who need them. Programs and services continue and will continue to be offered without delay or interruption. Madam Speaker, the amendments only update the current Act to reflect today's operations. I look forward to seeing the amendments move forward to the next phase, and Madam Speaker, I am pleased to move second reading. Thank you.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise in my place and speak to Bill 94 briefly. I do acknowledge and want to congratulate the Minister for her change in the Act, which will bring it more in line with reality as far as facilities. It did need to be updated to reflect the facilities that no longer offer services to APSI, and also to highlight the facility in Halifax that does provide that service. That part of the amendment, Madam Speaker, is something that was needed. It's a housekeeping item, and it certainly is appropriate. Our concern, Madam Speaker, is with the language. There is suggested by the minister that it was there would be in no way any change for the of the services that are delivered, but that there would be current language. And our review of the Act and the information that was provided to us at our caucus in a briefing by department staff only spoke to one word as far as language, and it was the word resource, and it was the removal of the word resource when referring to one of the APSI facilities. Currently, in the current legislation and current Act, speaks to resource center, This amendment takes out the word resource, and I guess, Madam Speaker, we have to question why that would be so important to take out the word resource. As the minister has said, as her staff have said, and as we know from the history of APSI, that APSI provides a lot of resources, services, and supports to students with special needs and to the teachers who are delivering programs and providing support for those students. So we've questioned why the word resource has been removed. The answer we were given, Madam Speaker, was that it would be more current language. I guess I would be asking, Madam Speaker, if in her concluding remarks, the minister may be able to explain why the word resource has been removed and how that takes us into current language and how that would strengthen the Act and how that would improve services to students. Thank you.
If I'm to recognize the minister, it will be to close debate on the bill. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move second reading of Bill 94.
Question is for second reading of Bill number 94. All in favour, say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill number 94, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 194 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Atlantic Provinces Special Education Authority Act.
Order that the bill be referred to Committee on Law Amendments. Recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could you please call Bill number 85, the Education Act?
I now call Bill number 85, the Education Act. 95. I'm sorry, 95. Thank you. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Education to move second reading.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today and move second reading of Bill 95, an Act to amend Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1995-96, the Education Act respecting school boards. Madam Speaker, I have a great appreciation for any citizen who is willing to take on the important and valued task of sitting as a member of a school board. It's not an easy job, but our collective goal remains the same: to ensure the best for our students, teachers, and the education system. Madam Speaker, these amendments in no way change or alter the ability of a board to censure a member. What these amendments will do is provide a reasonable threshold of what level of censure can be appealed to the minister for review. Madam Speaker, everyone should have the right to have their side of the story told, heard, and considered, and these amendments do not remove that right from anyone. Currently, there are 4 types of censure: public reprimand, removal of the right to sit as a board member for up to 3 months, suspension for up to 3 months, or to seek to have the member's seat vacated. Madam Speaker, every level of censure requires a motion to the board, an opportunity of the member to respond, and a vote in favour of censure with a 2/3 majority. This process for censure will remain exactly the same as it is today. The change is to the appeal process. The amendment will no longer permit a censure of public reprimand to be appealable to the minister for reversal. Madam Speaker, if an individual believes that the public reprimand in any way violates their individual rights, that member can always appeal for a judicial review. The right for a board member to appeal a board decision through the legal system has not changed. Madam Speaker, the bill, as introduced in 2008, was intended to give school boards more autonomy and authority in dealing with the conduct of the members. These amendments reinforce the intent of the legislation and continues to support the accountability among school board members. One may question why the other forms of censure can still be appealed to the minister. It was determined that the other forms of censure have the potential to impact the operations of the board. For example, if a board voted in favour to remove a member and vacate their seat, that member should have the opportunity to appeal that to the minister. Madam Speaker, these amendments provide a fair and reasonable threshold to determine what levels of censure should be appealable to the minister. These amendments were shared with school boards earlier this fall, and an opportunity for input was provided, and we did not hear any concerns about these amendments. The decision to censure a member is always taken seriously, and we expect all our school boards to conduct themselves appropriately. Censure is a decision made by school boards, and we must respect their decisions and their duty to protect the public confidence in their work. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to report that motions of censure are not common in our school boards. However, it should not be a reason to delay these amendments. We must be proactive in our work and respect the decisions of our school boards. These amendments create a clear and fair threshold for appeals to the minister, and I look forward to their passage on to the next phase. And Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to move second reading. Thank you.
I now recognize the honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, I'm pleased to stand in my place and speak to Bill number 95. And I have listened to the minister's comments. I have read the press release and have reviewed the bill. And in fact, again, have had staff from the department come to give us a briefing. And, you know, I want to refer, Madam Speaker, to the press release and to try to help folks understand the discrepancy between what the minister is saying in her press release and what she is saying on the floor of the House. For example, in the press release, the minister is saying, the press release says that this will give school boards more independence to deal with the conduct of members. And yet, in the comments here in the House, it is suggesting that that independence has already been given to school boards. That independence was given in Bill 215, which was introduced in November of 2008. And there were, as the minister had suggested, 4 different opportunities and clarifications for how boards could censure their members. That has not changed. So to suggest that this amendment will give boards more independence is really quite contradictory to what is actually happening. The only difference, Madam Speaker, in this act, in this amendment, is that the board member themselves who has been censured now has taken away from them the right to appeal to the minister. The 4 different options for boards to use if they needed to censure a member all allowed the individual member who may have been censured to appeal if they chose the decision of the board, and they could appeal that to the minister. The only difference that this act will have is it takes away that right from the board member if it's a public reprimand. So it does nothing, Madam Speaker, to, as the press release said, give more independence to school boards, because it does not change in any way what the school board can, will, or should do, or the process that they would follow. So again, that is quite misleading. The other issue with this particular amendment is that boards already are authorized. Boards do a good job of managing the decorum, the conduct within their boards, and so to take away the right of appeal to the minister is really not affecting the way the board operates. It does not affect the way that the chair would conduct the meetings. It does not affect the decision of boards to censure. Board members always have had the opportunity to go for a judicial review and if they wanted to appeal. That has always been there. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, not all board members can or will choose to go through the courts to appeal. So a board member who is receiving a public reprimand now has no other choice. They either don't appeal it at all or they go through the courts. What was there was an opportunity for an intermediate step where the board member could go and appeal to the minister. I know that the Nova Scotia School Boards Association and the board chairs were made aware of what this amendment would look like. And there were no comments from them. The minister has stated that, and we can understand why, because it has absolutely no effect or impact on how they do their business. What it does do, unfortunately, is take away something that an individual board member has had and hopefully never had to use, but if they did have to use it, it was an option for them. So they have been left now as an individual board member. If they receive a public reprimand and they want to appeal that, they have no other recourse but either to do nothing or to go through the courts. And I believe that we do, as the minister said, respect every board member. And I think it's unfortunate we've taken that away from them through this legislation.
If I'm to recognize the Honourable Minister of Education, it will be to close debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the member opposite for her comments on Bill 94. This bill sets out to clarify the true intent of the existing legislation to give school boards the authority to discipline members at the board level. At the end of the day, they must be accountable to each other and to answer to each other in times of perceived misconduct. Madam Speaker, the member of Colchester North said it well when she introduced the initial legislation, when she said at that time the responsibility to board members to discipline at the board level. This will give individual boards the authority they need to deal more effectively with an ongoing or disruptive behavior from board members.